The tulips were an afterthought. I'd grabbed them on the way. Bright yellow, her favorite. She said they made her think of spring in Maine, where we honeymooned, and where she first told me she wanted something more than just finance. She meant meaning, purpose, something she could build. I believed her, so I helped her build it. The deli bag was still warm when I stepped into the marble lobby of her office building, one of those glass and steel towers downtown where everyone walks like they're being followed and nobody makes eye contact unless it's for leverage. I nodded at the security guard, who barely looked up until I gave my name. Purpose of visit? Dropping off lunch. For my wife. Name? Julia Kramer. He straightened a little, blinking at me like I just told him I was there to see the Queen. You're Julia's husband? I nodded, tulips in one hand, lunch bag in the other. Yeah. Problem? The guard squinted at his monitor, then back at me. Sir, I see your husband every day. There he is now. I turned, and I swear to God, my heart didn't stop. It didn't even stutter. It just tilted, like a painting crooked on a wall you suddenly realize has been hanging like that for years. She was laughing, her head tilted slightly back in that rehearsed way she used to do at dinner parties when she wanted to charm donors. Her coffee was in her hand, correction, his hand now, as she passed it off to a man I'd never seen. He was tall, sharp in a charcoal suit, the kind of man who doesn't wait in lines or check his bank balance. He kissed her cheek. She touched his shoulder in that slow, proprietary way women use when they've memorized someone's skin. I didn't say a word. The tulips didn't shake because I was angry. They shook because I knew. I just knew. I knew what had been hiding in late nights and whispered calls in the hallway and half-finished explanations and the new perfume she suddenly got from a friend. I smiled at the guard. Thanks, I said. I'll come back later. He nodded, already looking past me. As I walked out, the tulips still in hand, I felt nothing. Not rage, not heartbreak, just pause, like when your computer freezes and you sit there with your fingers still hovering over the keyboard waiting for it to respond. Most men would have stormed in, thrown the flowers, yelled, called her a liar, accused her of cheating. I didn't. I played along, because sometimes silence is louder. Sometimes the worst thing you can do to a liar is act like you believe them. Let them keep performing. Let them dig the grave with their own lines. And also because I had questions. Not about the man. I'd learn his name. I'd know where he lived, what he drove, what allergies he had by Monday. No, I had questions about her. Not Julia the CFO, not Julia the carefully composed wife. I wanted to know when she decided I was expendable. I wanted to know if she ever looked at me the way she just looked at him. I wanted to know if she had any idea who she'd just betrayed. Because she didn't just cheat on me, she forgot who built her throne. And before I forget, more than 90% of people read these without subscribing. I get it. Scrolling is easier than clicking. But if you're still here, if the story pulled you in, tapping that follow button helps more than you know. It tells us to keep going, and trust me, it gets darker from here. Back to Julia. That night, she came home late again. Her heels clicked against the hardwood, sharp and unapologetic. She smiled at me like nothing had happened, like I hadn't watched her walk out of that building with another man's coffee in her hand and his lips on her cheek. Hey babe, she said. Sorry, last-minute finance call. Quarterlies are a mess. I kissed her cheek, right where he had. All good. I left you some salmon in the fridge. She poured a glass of wine, sighed dramatically. Can't wait until this product launch is over. Daniel's losing his mind. Daniel. Good. A name. Maybe he needs a day off, I said, turning back to the TV. Or a better espresso machine. She froze. What? You said you spilled coffee on it Monday. Just wondering if it got fixed. A beat too long passed. Oh, yeah. It's fine now. I nodded. File saved. Let her talk. Let her think she's still playing chess when she's already 2 moves from checkmate. I'll bring the tulips again. But next time, they won't be a gift. They'll be a eulogy. I didn't speak much that night. Just stirred the risotto, sliced the chicken, poured the wine. She chatted about vendor delays, budget overruns, some junior analyst who can't even format a PowerPoint. Her voice was light, practiced, breezy even. But every time she glanced my way, it felt like she was checking a watch she didn't wear, waiting to see if the bomb had gone off. I served dinner. She smiled like she always did, took a bite, told me it was amazing as always. then checked her phone, smirked at something, tapped a reply quickly. Work stuff? I asked, not looking up. Hmm? Oh yeah, just Daniel being Daniel. Second mention of him today. Good guy? She shrugged. Smart, intense, one of those visionary types. You know how tech guys are. Oh, I do, I said, sipping my wine. They always think the rules don't apply. She chuckled, a bit forced. Well, he gets results. I didn't respond. I just noted the way her fingers lingered on her phone screen before she finally turned it face down, then excused herself for a quick call. I didn't follow, just stared at her half-empty plate and felt the air in the room change temperature. I didn't check her phone. That's what amateurs do. That's what she'd expect. And frankly, I didn't need to. She was doing all the work for me, every lie tucked neatly between overused phrases and hasty justifications. I started keeping track, not in a diary, nothing so sentimental, just a spreadsheet, simple, color-coded, efficient. I treated it like I was managing a product timeline, because in a way, I'd always believed in tracking patterns. And Julia, she was nothing if not predictable once you removed the emotional layer. Monday, spilled coffee on the espresso machine. Wednesday, claimed she was working late with the team. Left the office at 6:13 p.m. Checked into the Warwick at 6:42 p.m. Thursday, said she had a late dinner with out-of-town investors. Left the restaurant at 8:04 p.m. Daniel's Tesla left 2 minutes later. I hired no PIs. I bought no gadgets. All it took was a calm mind, a telephoto lens, and a burner email. You'd be amazed what you can find through public security cameras, valet logs, and hotel staff with student loans. The man in the reflection, the one staring back at me in the mirror while I brushed my teeth next to her, he wasn't grieving, he wasn't shocked, he was processing. That man had always believed that betrayal was rare, that some lines didn't get crossed, especially by people you helped become who they are. I mean, I had practically written the playbook for Julia's corporate ascent. I gave her my contacts, smoothed her edges, whispered what to say in meetings when her nerves got the better of her. Every win she stacked had my fingerprints under the gloss. But now I looked at her, brushing her hair with that same old routine, and I didn't see a partner. I saw a con artist who'd gotten too comfortable with the act. The next morning, I left a little later than usual, timed to her departure. I watched from 3 cars behind as she turned left instead of right. Our home was west, her office was south. She went east. I didn't follow at first, just took a breath, let her believe she was free. Then, at the next light, I turned after her, no rush, no anger. I just watched, let the GPS map her choices. She parked at a cafe she'd never mentioned, met with Daniel again, this time in jeans and a hoodie. Casual, familiar. 2 people who don't have to pretend when they're off the clock. I didn't take photos. Not yet. Instead, I walked into a copy shop down the block, printed one thing, a black and white image I'd pulled from Daniel's LinkedIn profile. Clean corporate headshot, that smug open collar pose that says, I don't need a tie, I own the company. I pinned it to the back of my closet next to the safe, just a reminder, not of what I'd lost, but of what I was about to reclaim. That night, when she came home, she tossed her bag on the couch and plopped next to me, scrolling TikTok like a teenager. How was your day? I asked, still watching the screen. Ugh, exhausting. We're prepping for a product summit next week. Long hours, huh? She nodded, not looking up. Daniel's pushing hard. Wants the whole exec team in early tomorrow. I smiled at the TV. Good thing he's got such loyal staff. She didn't even flinch. She thought I was still in the dark, but I'd already unscrewed the light bulb. There's something strange about watching the person you love from a distance. Not across the dinner table, not curled beside you on the couch, but from across the street, through a lens, with the radio off and the engine idling. It feels obscene, like spying on a stranger, except the stranger has your last name and is using it like a credit card you never approved. The tulips wilted in the trash 3 days ago. By then, I already had a manila folder labeled Mercer, Daniel J. Mercer, CEO of Silvatech, Brown University dropout turned tech messiah, publicly charming, privately divorced, no kids, no alimony, spends his weekends trail running and tweeting about founder fatigue, predictably insufferable. His LinkedIn page was corporate catnip, visionary, disruptor, keynote speaker. I found a photo of him giving a TED-style talk about emotional architecture and leadership. Julia had commented on it 6 months ago. Proud to work with this genius. I remembered that day. She came home flushed and talkative, said she aced a strategy session. We celebrated with takeout and wine. I toasted to her win. Apparently, so did he. The next week became a study in habits, hers and mine. I shifted my schedule, left home 15 minutes after she did, kept my distance. She never noticed. Of course she didn't. She was too busy coordinating outfits with Mercer like some twisted corporate Barbie fantasy. Tuesday, 6:42 p.m. She turned left at the big roundabout, away from home. I followed at a distance. She pulled into the valet at the Luxton, that glass-skinned hotel where you can smell the money in the air. I parked across the street and watched through a pair of binoculars I hadn't used since Yellowstone. She stepped out in heels she hadn't worn in months. Black, sleek ankle strap, the kind you can't walk in for long unless you're only walking to bed. Daniel met her at the entrance. No hug, just a hand on the small of her back and a room key already in his palm. Not a word passed between them. They didn't need to speak. People in rehearsed affairs rarely do. I didn't follow them inside. What would have been the point? The story was already writing itself, and I wasn't in it. Instead, I took a picture from across the street, both of them in frame, hotel logo in the corner, timestamp at the bottom. Friday, she claimed she was attending a women's leadership dinner. Something empowering, she said. Big night for us female execs, she added with a wink. She even wore that silver necklace I gave her for our 10th anniversary. I remember how her hands shook when I clasped it around her neck that night. Now it sparkled under restaurant lighting, across a mahogany bar, while she fed olives to Mercer between tastings of a private wine collection in a boutique cellar on 9th. I had footage. I hired a drone guy I knew from a startup incubator I used to mentor, said I was making a short film about urban rhythms. He didn't ask questions. For $200 and a six-pack, he gave me sweeping footage of the wine bar's second-floor balcony. Julia was easy to spot. She gestured with her hands the way she always did when she was faking interest. Mercer leaned in too close, nodded too hard. Amateur seduction. Watching it was like seeing high schoolers rehearse a play they didn't understand. But it wasn't the flirtation that got me. It was her phone. She pulled it out mid-laugh, typed something quickly, smiled. 10 seconds later, my phone buzzed. Dinner's going long. Don't wait up. Love you. I stared at the message while she tipped her glass toward Mercer and touched her forehead to his for a moment that felt like a prayer. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't cave. I just smiled, faintly, at the irony. She was texting her husband from the lap of the man she thought I didn't know about, while pretending she still respected the ground I walked on. That was the moment it became real. It wasn't a suspicion anymore. Not a hunch. Not even a betrayal. It was a pattern. And patterns could be mapped, predicted, dismantled. I added the footage to a hard drive, printed stills, filed them by date and location, labeled everything cleanly. My handwriting didn't even waver. The strange thing was, the more undeniable it became, the calmer I felt, like her lies had been the static, and now that I could hear the signal, everything made sense. She was building a life without me. She just didn't know that I'd already built the foundation she was standing on, not just emotionally, financially, but that comes later. For now, I watched her slide into Daniel's passenger seat after the tasting, laughing at something he said, her hand on his thigh, and I whispered to no one, "Smile for the audit, sweetheart," because I'd seen the shadows. Now it was time to bring in the light. The name Silvatech meant nothing to me when I first heard Julia mention it. 3 years ago, during one of those hushed kitchen counter conversations where she spoke like she was asking for permission without actually asking, she said she wanted out of corporate. "I need to be somewhere that matters," she'd said, "a startup, something nimble, not just PowerPoints and ego meetings." I remember the way she bit her lip, half nervous, half excited, and I remember saying yes. Of course I said yes. She left a Fortune 500 finance role to join a friend's startup, a vision-driven underdog company that had potential. She never told me the name, just said it wasn't funded yet but had big ideas, and if she played it right, she'd be part of something from the ground up. I remember smiling. I even remember what I made for dinner that night: basil chicken and truffle gnocchi. We toasted with cheap kava because we were keeping it humble. I told her I was proud. I believed her, and behind the scenes I funded it. I'd been diversifying some of our liquid assets through early-stage angel investing via a managed trust, anonymous capital placements, tax-friendly, hands-off, the kind of thing you do when you want to quietly empower someone without burdening them with gratitude. One of the funds went to a tech startup pitching itself as a human-centered interface revolution, Silvatech. At the time, it was just another name in a stack of pitch decks. Now it was his company. And the funny part, that blind investment still existed, silent, untouched, sitting pretty in a trust whose name Julia never connected to me. I didn't find this out from some dramatic digging. I just opened my old accounts, ran a reconciliation for Q1 dividends, and there it was. Clear as day, trust 414A, an entity under my name, managed through a blind trustee, held Class A preferred stock in Silvatech, not common shares, not scraps, Class A, voting rights, board access, audit privileges. All this time, I'd been watching her cheat on me with a man whose company I helped fund. She built her power sitting in a seat I paid for, and now she was so drunk on the smell of her own perfume she didn't even realize who'd bought the goddamn candles. At first, I just stared at the screen. The numbers, the shares, the irony, then the bitterness hit. It was like swallowing rust, like suddenly realizing the house you built was being used to host a party you weren't invited to. She'd built her new life on a foundation of my generosity, my risk, my capital. She hadn't climbed her way up the startup world. She'd been handed the rope, and I was the idiot holding it. For exactly 30 minutes, I sat with that rage, then it shifted, became something else, not fire, ice. I stood calmly, walked to the liquor cabinet and poured a neat bourbon, not to numb anything, just to mark the moment. Because now I had a tool, not just dirt, not just pictures or footage or clever notes pinned to corkboards. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This wasn't proof of betrayal. This was leverage. And the best part, it was clean, legal, strategic. I wasn't going to scream at her. I wasn't going to show up drunk at her work or send anonymous threats like some jilted soap opera husband. No. She wanted a business world. She wanted to play among titans. Perfect. Because now I had a seat at her table. She thought she was dancing with a king. She didn't realize the real king was watching from the shadows, holding the deed to the ballroom. The trust was dormant, but not dead. It was time to wake it up. Why now? My lawyer asked, sliding the thick manila folder across the desk. His office smelled like old paper and confidence. Walnut bookshelves, Persian rug, the works. He'd represented me for over a decade, quietly, surgically, the way I preferred. When I built things, he made sure no one could tear them down. He adjusted his glasses and flipped to the Silvatech page. You've sat on this trust for almost 3 years. You never even attended a shareholder briefing. So why now? I didn't answer right away, just tapped my finger lightly against the margin where Daniel Mercer's name sat under Chief Executive Officer. The ink was fresh from a recent filing, probably printed right around the time he was slipping hotel keycards into Julia's purse. Because, I said, I've had enough of being generous. He frowned, but only slightly. The shares give you silent voting rights. You're not majority, but you do have audit privileges and board entry access under the bylaws. Want me to trigger it? I nodded. Time to stop being silent. 2 days later, Daniel Mercer received a certified notice from the trust's registered entity, a request for a full internal board audit citing potential misuse of executive resources, questionable discretionary spending, and probable conflict of interest within the executive branch. The language was careful, not accusatory, just enough to signal danger without revealing the hunter. I didn't expect an immediate response. Corporate sharks don't panic when there's blood in the water. They investigate the source. Mercer, being as slippery as his cologne-heavy photo suggested, would probably assume it came from an annoyed investor or some regulatory tickle. He didn't know it came from the husband of the woman he kissed outside the Luxton Hotel, the same man who bought the table they were playing poker on. 3 days after the letter went out, Julia received her own memo. Internal Finance Directive. All C-suite expense accounts suspended pending financial review. Retroactive oversight initiated for the previous 6 quarters. Travel logs, client entertainment, hospitality reimbursements, all flagged. That night, she came home later than usual. Not late enough to suspect an affair, just the right kind of late to sell we had to stay and work through it without sounding suspicious. She tossed her bag on the kitchen island and let out a dramatic sigh. Work is a circus. Some weird financial hiccup. Our accounts team froze all our expense privileges today. Daniel's freaking out. I swear, startups are just chaos with a Slack channel. I was stirring chili, turned to her, eyebrow raised. Tough time for startups. She blinked. Yeah. I smiled and went back to the pot. You guys been spending a lot on travel lately? She shrugged, pouring herself wine. Normal stuff. A few conferences, investor summits, dinners, nothing insane. Sure, I said. Those wine tastings aren't cheap. She paused, mid-pour. What? Nothing, I said, waving it off. Just a joke. You know, startups and their culture perks. She chuckled, distracted. But the seed was planted. Her eyes flickered with something. Maybe confusion, maybe caution. Good. Let it grow. Because I didn't need her to confess. I didn't want a screaming match or some teary monologue about feelings and distance and how things just happened. I wanted control. And now I had it. Daniel's precious little startup, the baby he'd raised from slide decks and soft money investments, was under a spotlight. Every dollar he'd spent romancing Julia under the guise of client engagement would be examined. Every business class flight they took to scout talent would be documented. No accusations, not yet. Just questions. And questions, when asked in front of board members and auditors, are more lethal than proof. Proof can be argued. Questions plant doubt. Doubt creates distance. And distance, that's where people self-destruct. Julia didn't suspect me, not yet. Her lies had made her arrogant. She still kissed me before bed like nothing had shifted, still called me babe in that voice she used when she wanted me to feel like I mattered. She didn't realize that every tender word now rang like a punchline. Because behind the warmth of our kitchen, behind the mundane dinner and casual conversation, I was unspooling her world, quietly, precisely, with a smile she hadn't earned in years. The audit would take weeks, maybe months. That was fine. I could wait. This was just the first scalpel. The carpet was thicker than I remembered. Burgundy with that expensive, unnecessary pattern woven into it, something you'd find in boardrooms that pretend to be forward-thinking but still have mahogany credenzas and bottled water with personalized labels. I walked past reception without a word. The security badge they mailed me after my trust's activation slid into the scanner like it belonged there, because it did. The boardroom was on the 27th floor. Full glass windows overlooking a city that had no idea reckoning was quietly taking the elevator up. They weren't expecting me. Even better. The double doors swung open with a hiss. The board was mid-discussion, jackets draped over chairs, laptops open, polished hands gesturing. Daniel was leaning over a chair, laughing at some tired anecdote, just loud enough to remind everyone he was in charge. Until he saw me. The color left his face like someone had pulled a plug. He straightened fast, eyes darting, at first to the board, then to Julia, then back to me, like a kid caught sneaking out with the principal's daughter. Julia froze, her pen stilled in her hand, mid-scribble. Her jaw tightened. "Hi, Daniel," I said, with the calm of a man watching someone else walk into their own funeral. He recovered, sort of. "I didn't realize you were, still around?" I offered, walking toward the head of the table. Neither did she, apparently. Dead silence. The chairman, a round man with anxious hands, stood. "And you are?" I set my briefcase down gently, unlatched it, handed him the file folder. "Name's not important, but the trust I manage owns 7% of Silvatech's original issue stock. Class A preferred shares, silent stakeholder. Until today." The folder opened. A set of tabs peeked out, neatly labeled. Inside you'll find itemized travel logs, expense reports, and meeting inconsistencies. Discretionary funds used for personal entertainment. C-suite activity conflicting with stated operational strategy. I'm invoking my rights for a board-level audit and, effective immediately, requesting a vote on executive conduct standards and potential misuse of company resources. Daniel looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't decide which lie would land softest. Julia tried first. I think we should go through the proper. I raised a hand without looking at her. "Save it for your HR exit interview." She blinked, stunned, but bit her tongue. Her hand slowly retreated from the table. She realized too late this wasn't a conversation. This was a verdict. I continued, facing the board. I'm not here to sling mud. I'm here because I've watched this company veer off course. The numbers don't lie, nor do the surveillance timestamps, receipts, or the emails included in tab 4. Daniel swallowed hard. I turned to him. I believed in the vision once, enough to fund it quietly through a trust with zero interference. But what I've seen over the last 6 months, how leadership spins, the lack of transparency, the personal entanglements masquerading as strategy, makes it clear that something needs to change. Still, I never said the word affair. I didn't need to. The room was smart. And if they weren't, the documents would handle the rest. I stepped back, let them digest. The chairman cleared his throat, flipping through the tabs with increasing agitation. He glanced at Daniel, who suddenly looked very interested in the grain pattern of the table. Julia sat motionless. No twitch, no defense, just staring straight ahead like she was waiting for someone to declare it all a bad dream. The vote didn't happen right there. It couldn't, but I knew the game. The moment I left, they'd whisper, huddle, recalibrate, trust collapses quietly, then all at once. And I had just handed them every reason to start the countdown. As I packed up, I made eye contact with Julia. For a second, just one, her eyes pleaded. Not for forgiveness, but for understanding. I gave her nothing, not anger, not hate, just cold, silent consequence. Then I turned to the board. You know how founders say transparency is a core value? I said, tucking the folder back into my case. Today, I'm just helping you live up to it. And then I left. No applause, no drama, just a room full of powerful people who now knew the real architect had finally shown up. Julia always left early on Thursdays. She liked being the first one in, liked that little power move of sending 6:12 a.m. emails with subject lines like Q2 forecast thoughts and follow-up from 3:14, the kind of messages that make subordinates sip their coffee a little faster. But today, when she swiped her badge at Silvatech's entrance, the reader beeped red. She tried again, still red. Her smile faltered. She pressed the intercom. Security responded, calm but firm. Please wait in the lobby, ma'am. Someone will be down shortly. Ma'am. That was new. 5 minutes later, a woman in a Navy HR vest emerged through the elevator with a small rolling cart and a clipboard. Julia Kramer? Yes. Please sign here. What is this? The HR woman's voice was professional, rehearsed. Severance documentation. Effective immediately. Board decision. Julia blinked. This is a mistake. I'm just the messenger. She looked past her toward the elevator bank. I need to speak to Daniel. I believe he's out of office today. Call him. He's unavailable. The HR woman stepped to the side, revealing a cardboard box behind her. Inside, 2 framed photos, a coffee mug that said, Cottrell plus ale to conquer, a silver pen set, and a potted succulent she'd only watered when people were watching. Julia's voice cracked. You can't be serious. The woman didn't flinch. You'll need to return the company laptop and phone. Your email account has been deactivated. Julia fumbled for her cell. No signal, no company VPN, just a dead screen. For a moment, she stood there with her hand on the cart, unable to move. Startup Cinderella at midnight, wondering how the spell unraveled. She left the building through the side door. The cab ride home was a blur. She stared straight ahead, refusing to cry, gripping the box like a lifeline, like proof she had existed in that space. When she reached the house, she expected warmth, or at least a wall to lean against. But the front door was unlocked, and the first thing she noticed was the silence. No whir of the espresso machine, no keys on the hook, just absence. Then her eyes fell on the hallway closet, half empty. His shoes, gone. Coats, missing. She stepped slowly into the living room. The manila envelope sat on the dining table like it had been waiting for her, same kind as last time. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, a single-page divorce petition. Pre-signed, filed, dated, no accusations, no insults. Just calm, formal language that said, "This is over. You're dismissed." Beneath it, another document. Transfer of ownership agreement. It was her signature. She didn't remember signing it, but there it was, time-stamped, months ago. A standard transfer she'd approved during a routine funding shuffle. boilerplate paperwork Daniel handed her late one night during wine and laughter and casual mentions of simplifying equity. She'd never read it carefully. Now it was clear she had legally transferred her shares back to the blind trust, his trust. Everything she'd earned was gone, not clawed away, not wrestled in a legal brawl, just shifted like chess pieces when you weren't watching. She dropped the envelope. Her knees gave out a second later. She wasn't just unemployed, she was untethered. Her status, gone. Her power, vapor. Even her phone refused to buzz. She called Daniel twice, straight to voicemail. On the third attempt, the line simply clicked. Number disconnected. Julia stared at her hands, as if searching for something that used to be there, her grip, her edge, her composure. She walked to the bedroom, opened her laptop. Access denied, all her files. Wiped calendar? Blank. She searched her email out of habit, forgetting it was already gone. She tried texting a few contacts. We need to talk, something happened. No reply. For the first time in years, there was no audience. No team to rally, no one to reassure her that she was irreplaceable. Because she wasn't. She'd just found out how quietly and completely one can be erased from their own empire. Not by scandal, not by public disgrace, but by someone who knew exactly where she hid her weaknesses and had the patience to wait for her to hand over the knife. The first time she called, it rang twice before going to voicemail. She left a message, short, unsteady. Please, call me, I don't know what's happening. By the third attempt, the line didn't even ring, just a cold digital chime followed by, this number is no longer in service. She stared at the screen, then tried again. Nothing. She opened her banking app. The joint account they'd shared for 13 years now bore only one name, his. Her access revoked, her credentials invalid. The savings account where they'd pulled bonuses, tax refunds, vacation money, now required a two-factor code sent to a number she no longer had access to. She called the bank, waited, pressed numbers, explained herself. The rep on the line was polite but unmoved. Ma'am, I see a notarized removal authorization from the co-holder dated last week. It meets all federal compliance standards. There must be a mistake, she said, her voice cracking. I'm his wife. A pause. According to our records, ma'am, you're the soon-to-be ex-wife. Click. That afternoon, she drove across town to his brother's place, banged on the door. No one answered. She stood there in the cold wind with her coat barely buttoned, mascara running slightly at the edges. The porch light flicked on, then off, but no one came. The next day, she tried a different angle. She called Marcus, a mutual friend, one of the few people who had known them both before careers, before money, before Julia wore silk scarves and knew the difference between single-origin espresso and mass-market blends. He picked up after 2 rings, voice guarded. Marcus, I need to talk to him. Just talk. That's all. Please. A silence stretched. When he finally spoke, his tone was careful, like someone walking a narrow beam. He told me to tell you something if you ever called. What? She asked, already bracing. More silence. Then a sigh. Check who signed the original Silvatech seed agreement. Click. The line went dead. Her breath hitched. She pulled her laptop toward her with shaking hands, opened the encrypted folder where the early Silvatech documents lived. Old contracts, term sheets, early pitch decks, all archived in neat subfolders with labels like Angel Round 1, Founders Equity, Cap Table Draft. She scrolled, clicked, opened the earliest file she could find. Seed, agreement, trust, signatory, PDF. Her eyes scanned the document. Her pulse climbed. There it was. Black ink. His name. Signed January 17, 2026, 5 months before she even joined the company. 5 months before Daniel ever pitched her in that wine bar with his dazzling smile and big talk about building something meaningful. She clicked properties on the PDF. The metadata showed the original file was created on a machine she recognized, his old laptop, the one she made fun of for being clunky while she paraded around with her rose gold MacBook. He had funded Silvatech before she ever stepped into its orbit, not as a favor, not as a shared vision, but in silence, like a chess master setting up the board 5 moves ahead, then walking away and letting everyone else pretend they were improvising. Julia slumped back in the chair. She wasn't betrayed by an outsider. She wasn't even betrayed, not in the way she'd imagined. She'd built her entire power on top of a foundation he had poured, deliberately, strategically, and with full awareness that she would never thank him for it. No wonder he hadn't yelled. No wonder he hadn't fought. He didn't need to, because when you plant the seed, you don't panic when the tree bends the wrong way. You wait for the storm, and then you reclaim the roots. Tears came, but they weren't clean, not cathartic. Just messy, confused streaks as the realization hit her in layers. He wasn't her fallback. He wasn't her side character. He was the ground she stood on, and she'd been dancing on it with another man, convinced it would never give out. But now the earth was gone, and she was falling. 3 weeks later, she sat alone in a short-term rental with cracked tile and thin walls, the kind of place that charges luxury prices for broken blinds and city charm. Her world had shrunk to a laptop, a microwave, and a half-unpacked suitcase she kept pretending she would sort through tomorrow. It was late when the Silvatech live stream started, the rebrand gala. She hadn't planned to watch it, but the link showed up in her inbox from a news alert. Silvatech unveils post-disruption vision. New leadership, new name. Disruption. That's what they were calling it now. Not scandal, not implosion. Just a polite corporate euphemism for you got replaced. She clicked. The broadcast opened with a high-production drone shot sweeping across a rooftop venue lit in deep indigos and silvers, a live string quartet playing something expensive and forgettable. A wide banner hung behind the main stage. Arcava, the future, streamlined, new name, new font, new future. Then he walked on stage. Not Daniel, him, her husband, or no, not anymore. He wore a dark gray suit, no tie, shirt open just enough to look intentional. His posture, his calm, the way he waited for the applause to settle, it all spoke of someone who wasn't stepping into the light, but had been patiently waiting in it while others fumbled in shadows. "Good evening," he said. 3 years ago, Silvatech started with a vision, one that was always meant to evolve. And now we move forward with a new name, a new structure, and a leadership team that knows the difference between growth and chaos. Applause again. Julia didn't blink. On screen, he gestured toward 2 new executives. Young, fresh, not scandal-tainted, not her. He introduced the new board, spoke about transparency, about ethics, words that tasted like blood in her mouth. And then, as the stream cut to a press segment, a reporter raised her hand and leaned into the mic. "Your divorce made headlines recently. Any comment?" He paused, not awkwardly, not defensively, just enough to let the room lean in. Then he smiled, faint, almost kind. "Sometimes," he said, "people invite strangers into their lives. Sometimes they hand them your keys." The reporter scribbled furiously. Another question followed. "Do you regret investing in Silvatech?" His eyes flicked slightly toward the camera. "I regret trusting someone who forgot whose name was on the deed." Laughter, soft, uncomfortable, real. He didn't elaborate, just nodded to the moderator, then stepped off stage with a confidence Julia didn't recognize anymore. Not because he hadn't always had it, but because she'd spent years pretending he didn't. She stared at the screen long after the broadcast ended, the cursor blinking on a paused frame. Him standing under the new logo, the city skyline behind him, alone but unshaken. That smile, it wasn't smug, it wasn't cruel. It was the look of a man who no longer needed revenge to feel whole, because he'd already taken everything that mattered, not out of spite, out of principle. Her inbox chimed, a spam folder notification. Mixed in with the newsletters and fake LinkedIn invites was a message from a former coworker. Subject: "Damn, you should have seen this coming." No body, just a link. She didn't click it. She didn't need to. Her name was already gone from the executive bios. Her interviews had been purged from the press page. Her quotes deleted from case studies. Even the team photo from that retreat in Sonoma, where she and Daniel once posed with matching champagne glasses, had been cropped. Now it looked like he was just holding a drink. Alone. She closed the laptop. The silence in the room wasn't heavy. It was final. The hallway light flickered as she climbed the stairs. Another rejection email still open on her phone. "We've decided to move forward with another candidate." No reason given. No feedback. Just a polite corporate brush-off for someone whose name used to guarantee callbacks. Now it got her silence. Or worse, ghosted by assistants who used to schedule her flights. She'd worn her best blazer, the navy one with the subtle tailoring and the lucky pearl button that had once landed her the Silvatech offer. Today, it didn't land her a second interview. Her heels clicked down the hallway of the furnished apartment she hated. It still smelled like someone else's air freshener, cheap vanilla and artificial citrus, a place that felt like a holding cell with a mortgage. That's when she saw it, a box, plain, unmarked, small enough to fit in one hand, sitting neatly on her doormat like it had been delivered by fate itself. She looked up and down the hallway. No cameras, no neighbors, no movement. She picked it up, slowly, cautiously, and carried it inside. Sat down, opened the lid. Inside was a single tulip, bright yellow, still fresh, stem trimmed clean. It shouldn't have meant anything. A flower, a plant. But her fingers trembled as she lifted it because in her chest something cold began to expand, something she hadn't felt since the moment her badge failed to beep. Beneath the flower was a printed photo, grainy, a still from a security camera, the lobby of Silvatech, and in the frame the security guard from that day, the first day, the day she thought she was untouchable. He was gesturing toward a tall man exiting the building, Daniel, and there she was beside him, handing him her coffee, smiling like she'd already rewritten the script of her life. Beneath the photo, a caption, "Security only recognizes the real husband." Her throat tightened. She pulled the final item from the box, a folded piece of thick white paper, stationery she recognized, from his old desk, monogrammed, unfolded it, his handwriting, sharp, effortless, clean. "Thanks for teaching me how replaceable I was. Turns out, I wasn't." That was it. No signature, no contact info, no grand farewell, just a sentence that landed harder than any argument, any shouted accusation, any courtroom slap. Her hands went slack. The tulip dropped. She sank to the floor, knees hitting the tile with a dull thud. No tears came this time. Not because she'd run out, because there was nothing left to feel that hadn't already been extracted, slowly, methodically, like blood drawn from a vein, until all that remained was skin and memory. She had tried to rebuild, sent out resumes, networked, swallowed her pride, and offered to consult for people who once looked up to her, but word had spread, not the details, just the truth. She burned the wrong bridge, the wrong one indeed, because she hadn't just betrayed a man. She'd betrayed the architect, the one who built her platform, gave her a crown, and watched her melted into bullets. And then, without raising his voice, without dragging her through scandal or spectacle, he walked away, but not before letting her feel the air of her new world, thin, cold, and deafeningly quiet. Because that was the real victory, not the assets, not the company, not the rebrand. It was this. She would spend the rest of her life explaining a downfall no one would ask about, telling a story no one wanted to hear, whispering about a man no one believed was real, because the version of him she sold was a ghost. But ghosts don't leave tulips, kings do.